How's it going, everyone? Taki here. We have had a ton of portrait-based handhelds this year, and today we're going to take a look at another one. This is the RG35XX Plus, which is an improved version of the RG35XX that launched earlier this year. This one has more power, and hopefully it'll make a much better alternative to other handhelds that are harder to come by. Inside the packaging, we have a manual, some wipes, a screen protector, a charging cable, and the device itself. Jumping right into the specs, the RG35XX comes with the all-winner H700 processor. This is a media processor that seems to be based on the H616 processor that I've reviewed before. It has 4 Cortex A53 cores clocked up to 1.5 GHz, and it has a Mali G31MP2 GPU. We have 1 GB of LPDDR4 RAM, 64 GB of SD card storage with a second slot for another card, and a 3.5-inch 480p IPS panel. On this revision, our battery is easier to replace, with the stock one coming in at 3,300 mAh. All of this runs on Linux with support for Wi-Fi 5 and Bluetooth 4.2. When it comes to pricing, this is a cheaper handheld than the usual crop of Anbernic handhelds. They had this on discount for the first 2 days that this went on sale, and it was available with a US-based price of $58. The normal price for this comes in at $64, and I assume that will be the price going forward on their own website and on AliExpress. These prices do not include shipping. They had a second AliExpress listing with shipping included, and that one came in at $69.99 during the promotional period. I bought 2 RG35XX Plus units from Anbernic with my own money for this video, and I paid around $47 each with shipping included. At that price, it's a no-brainer. That brings us to our first topic, which is what this hardware should be capable of. I did a video on the state of emulation on the Android side 2 years ago, and I ended up making a tier list for different systems and the kinds of hardware that you would need to be able to access that tier. Not every tier applies to Linux handhelds in the same way, but they do on this low end with the SoC that we have. The OG RG35XX was a tier 2 handheld, and it was capable of playing at least a few titles from each of these systems with the help of third-party operating systems. Based solely on the processor that we have this time around, the RG35XX Plus should be a low to mid-tier 3 handheld. Controls aside, it should be able to play a lot of PSP titles, upscaled PS1, most of the Dreamcast library, and most of the N64 library. Again, this is if the device was rocking Android, but I do believe this is where it will be once the hardware is fully utilized. Now, the market has changed significantly since the last time I looked at the RG35XX, so what I want to do now is just show how this looks compared to the current crop of portrait-based handhelds, and there are a lot of them. We're going to exclude the RG Nano for this and go right to the Miyoo Mini. This is still the best small device that you can get, and it is a bit smaller than the RG35XX Plus, but these are both pocketable devices. If we go up from there, we have the Miyoo Mini Plus. This has the same size screen as this new RG device, but it has a weaker processor that isn't as capable as this new one. And obviously we still have the RG35XX, which this competes with. These are the same size, and they can do some of the same things, but this new one should be able to do a lot more. This guy is a newer release. It's the R35S. I did a video on it not that long ago. It is an extremely cheap device, but there is a better version that's slightly bigger than this, and that's the R36S. This one is obviously significantly bigger than the RG device, but it does have dual analog sticks that are useful for some of the things that this new device can do. The biggest device that we have in this price range is the XU10. This is one that I did a video on not that long ago. It is a bit more expensive than this one, and it also has less performance, which is an important distinction to make. And when we take all of the handhelds and put them side by side from smallest to biggest, this is the picture that we have. And a lot of these are consoles that were released this year. I have to point out that that's not common. In years prior, we never had this many portrait-based handhelds, and I'm all for it. Even though these are all contemporary devices that compete with each other, this doesn't tell you the full story because these devices aren't ordered based on their capabilities. If we do that, it would look something like this. On the low end, we have the Miyoo devices with a Cortex A7 processor and no GPU. And then we move up to the RG35XX, which has an A9 and a GPU. To the side of that, we have 3 RK3326 devices, with the XU10 being the better of the bunch. And then on the far side of that, we have the new RG35XX Plus, which has the same GPU as these guys, but the CPU is a lot better. In this section, we're going to focus on the hardware, and we're going to try to cover all of the things that have changed in this new device compared to the original RG35XX. Starting out with the front, there's not a lot that has changed. They've slightly changed the angle of the start and select buttons, and they've added a slightly rounded edge to the D-pad. All of the buttons on the front half are the same size as they were on the RG35XX. If we do a close-up shot of the D-pad, you can see that not only is this edge on all sides slightly rounded, but the corners and all of the edges are rounded. On the 35XX, we have flat edges, and while this is also rounded, it is not rounded to the extent of the new device, and that makes this one a bit more rough to use if you're going to be playing games that you have to roll the D-pad. I find that doing something like this on the RG35XX kind of digs into my thumbs after a while, but that feels a lot smoother on this revision. Besides that, the back is where you're going to find the biggest change from the input side of things, and that is these shoulder buttons. In the new 35XX Plus, Anbernic has gone for a style that we've seen in some third-party DIY mods for the 35XX. This is going to be a lot easier to use, and the buttons themselves feel better to use than the original device. It's a small change, but it does make a meaningful improvement to the ergonomics of this. Beyond that, everything on the right half of the unit is the same as it was on the first device, and the same thing goes for the other side, but the difference this time around is they've done a slight redesign on the volume button. On the bottom, we still have a single USB port that's labeled for DC charging, but I believe this one can do OTG support, so we'll have to check on that. And on the top half, we still have an HDMI port and 2 LED indicator lights. The final change is not one that's very obvious. This new one is slightly thicker than the original. If we measure the bottom half of the 35XX, we get around 20 millimeters of thickness, but that same area is around 22 millimeters on the 35XX Plus. The thickness on the screen half comes in around 15 millimeters on the Plus, which is the same that you'll see on the original. The next new feature on this is Wi-Fi support, and this gives a lot of added functionality that makes it a better product versus the original RG35XX. Admittedly, the network settings menu here isn't the best. It works the best if you only connect to a single signal, but if you have more than one access point that you're trying to access, it is really a pain to get it to switch from one to the other. But once you are connected, you essentially get 3 new things that you can do on the device. A fourth one could potentially be OTA updates for third-party operating systems. This doesn't support OTA updates, but I would expect that we could see that kind of functionality in some Linux distros. It'll be disabled by default, but if you go into RA and you turn on Show Online Updater, this will allow you to update some important things on the device, and I actually had to use this to update one of the controllers that I wanted to connect to this with Bluetooth. That process is pretty simple. All you have to do is go down to Update Controller Profiles, and it will download that from the internet. You can also use this online functionality to update the cheats files and overlays for this RetroArch system. But I think the thing that you'll probably get the most use out of is Netplay. And if we go into RetroArch on both devices, we can play a game that has 2-player simultaneous support, like Contra, for example. On this right unit, I'm going to go over to the Netplay menu and click on Host, and then I'm going to select Start Netplay Host. Both of these devices are connected to the same Wi-Fi, so if I go over on this white one, I should see it on the bottom over here if I go to Refresh Netplay LAN List. In this case, it didn't automatically find the game, so I'm going to go into the folder and select it manually. After I do that, they should be ready to go. And now I can play this game on 2 different devices. You don't need another RG35XX to do this. You can do this on other devices as long as you have the same emulator core and the same ROM. If you have younger kids, these smaller handhelds that have network functionality built in are awesome because you don't have to worry about getting disconnected while you're playing if a USB dongle were to fall out. And that just leaves us with Moonlight. And even though this is a cool thing that we have on this, it's not really that useful, but you can do some interesting things with it. There are a lot of different paths you can take when you open this up with Moonlight. By default, it's going to want to load up Steam, and that seems to be hard-coded. Right now I have this running Tears of the Kingdom. This is not emulating the title, so before like Nintendo goes crazy, this is not emulation. I'm running this from a real Switch and just sending the video signal over to this device. It's not really practical, but it does look cool to see it in action, and the latency isn't that bad, and the video signal also looks pretty good. That being said, we're looking at a 16:9 image that is squeezed into a 4:3 frame, so it doesn't look that great. But the main use case for something like this is to stream Steam games, and with our limited control set that we have here, you're going to want to stick to some 2D platforming games that don't need more buttons than what we have. As you can see, it does work. However, it's not a flawless experience. There were times when my signal would freeze and I would have to reboot the device and reconnect with Moonlight to get it going again. You're also limited in the sense that you can't easily change any of the streaming settings that you would have access to if this were using a client on, let's say, Android. It's a cool thing to be able to do, but it isn't for me. With that Wi-Fi support, we also gained Bluetooth support, and this is really the MVP of this entire refresh. This is going to allow us to easily connect Bluetooth controllers that don't have any limitations in the way of control input. Getting going with this is pretty easy. You just go into the settings menu and then go to Bluetooth settings. And then when you have the enable Bluetooth option, you're just going to press A to open that up. Now on my RG device, I'm going to go down to search device. And I'm going to press X to refresh. After searching for the device, I can see that we have the 8-bit Do SN30 Pro there. I'm going to press A, and that should hopefully connect it to the controller. After that, we're able to navigate the entire device with this controller. There are some quirks to this, but it does generally work very well. Now, I read a lot of comments for people that are like, okay, we have more power in this device, but we don't have an analog stick. And yeah, that is true. But at least with Bluetooth, we can play those games with the controls that we do need. And this is going to make more sense in the next section. But as you can see here, we're able to play this with no problems. Bluetooth functionality means that we should also be able to connect this to a set of earbuds or Bluetooth speakers. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get that to work. I think this might be a software issue, so this probably can be fixed in the future. I tried some Bluetooth earbuds from ROG and another set from Black Shark. I got the ROG ones to connect, but the audio wouldn't route to them. I also used a cheap JBL speaker that won't do anything. As you can see right here, it is in pairing mode. If I go over to select it and then press A, it'll back out into this menu and it will never end up actually connecting to the speaker. But let's circle back to Bluetooth support because that's going to play a part when we take a look at HDMI. If I connect this HDMI cable to this screen, the 35XX Plus screen will shut off, and then this screen will turn on. At first, I thought this was just stretching out the 4:3 image to a 16:9 screen, but that doesn't seem to be the case. If you look at the words right here in the center, that exists in the center of these two icons. If I remove the cable, you can see that the G in game overlaps some of the RA icon. The same thing happens with the M and the S on rooms. This is actually a big deal because other devices that this competes with, especially ones from Anbernic that have this functionality, either have it by hot plugging where you are just stretching out the image, or you need to fully reboot the device to get a 16:9 screen. That doesn't seem to be the case, at least with this UI. Unfortunately, when we go into RA, it still thinks that we're using a 4:3 screen. So when we play those 4:3 games, they are going to try to fill out the entire screen. Again, I'm not sure if this is a hardware limitation. It could be a hardware limitation depending on how they implemented this HDMI output, but I'm hoping that it's a software limitation because it would be cool to get docked functionality with this. One thing to note about this HDMI output, you cannot hot plug it when you are inside a game. If I do that now, this screen won't turn back on, and if I sleep the device and try to wake it back up, it also won't do that. I would actually have to close out of that game to get it to go back to normal. And just so you know what I'm talking about, here I have the quit option selected. I'm just going to disconnect this cable and then I'm going to press A on my controller. And you should see that the screen comes back on. Just something to be aware of. The last topic that I want to talk about on the hardware side of things is charging support or PD charging support. There was some discussion on Reddit about this topic not that long ago about how these devices with USB Type-C ports don't support PD chargers and how it's not really talked about in reviews. So I do want to just address that. Here's the first charger that I tested, and this red cable is the one that I was using with it. Once I have this entire thing connected, I can see that it's charging at 8 watts with this battery meter that I have. To test out these, I won't need that battery meter anymore because this screen will light up when it is delivering power. So let's just remove those feet, connect it to my extension cord, and then I'm going to connect the charging cable that I was using during my initial tests. And as you can see, nothing is happening. On the off chance that it was a cable issue, I also went ahead and used this very thick charging cable that I use in almost all of my videos, and it also didn't work, but this cable in this setup works with other devices that support PD charging correctly. But in the end, when I went back to using the original red cable that I was testing to begin with, it does work with all of the PD chargers that I have, including the 3 that I showed in this video. So the short answer is that this device doesn't really support PD charging in the way that people would want to, but it does support some Type-C to Type-C cables with a PD charger. Going forward, I hope companies pay more attention to this issue so we can get proper PD support on these retro gaming handhelds. It really is annoying to have to use these older chargers when most of the devices that I own support modern chargers like the one that I have here. Anyway, I'll have links to these two chargers and this thick charging cable that I use in all of my videos in the description box below. So that's it for hardware. Let's now switch gears and talk about software. And if you have an RG35XX, then a lot of this is going to seem similar to you. I'm just going to go through this quickly because I want to get to some other topics. Inside the main system, we have the same UI that we have on the last device. We have a background that we can change along with a set of icons that we can also customize. Inside the Game Rooms menu, you will see a list view of all of the systems that you have access to based on the ROMs that you have added to your SD card. Notable things on this are going to be those tier 3 systems that we talked about earlier. If we go into any of those subsections, we'll see the ROM list on the side here with the box art on the right hand side. As you'll notice, all of my ROMs are in Chinese, and that's because I bought this unit in China. If you bought this overseas, you wouldn't see this. Let's load up a GBA game to see what options we have once a game is loaded. So here we have that GBA game loaded up, and the first thing that I can see is they are stretching out this image to fill out the entire screen. If I press that menu button, we have a few things that we can change. We can customize the video display effect. By default, this was on HD, and that is going to smooth out the pixels. I don't really like the way this looks, so I'm going to go back and set that to fast. Under video display aspect, we can see that that's set to full screen. I'm going to go ahead and set that to aspect so that way it will display how it would look on a GBA. And as you can see, we have small black borders on the top and the bottom, but the aspect ratio of the center is the same that it would be on a GBA, and I think this looks better for these games. Also in that menu, we have exit game, save game, load game, restart game, and backlight brightness. This is set to level 5, which is the highest level of brightness that this supports, and it is good enough in my opinion. If you like to play these at night, level 1 is the lowest that it can go, and this is not as dark as some other devices that are on the market, but it is decent. If you end up making a save state inside this menu, it will make a little screenshot of what you are currently playing, and then you can see that inside the load state menu. So that's the Game Rooms menu. If we go over to the RA game menu, we can see those systems displayed a bit differently. This time around, I'm going to go over to the GBA section, and I'm going to load up that same game again. If I press the menu button now, I can see that I'm inside a full RA system, and this is really good to see. When the RG35XX came out, we were limited to that previous system that I just showed you, and as you could see, it doesn't have a lot of options available. But having full access to RA like this is a killer feature, and this is going to make it so that way I probably won't even need to consider third-party operating systems. But yeah, in here we can configure everything that we want. If we go over from RA game, we have a favorite section, which we don't need to spend a lot of time on. And we also have a history section, which will just show the games that you were last playing. This will show the games that you play in these first two menus, but it won't show the games you play in the third option that we can use. We have a search feature, which works well, especially if you have a large collection of ROMs. I'm playing all of my ROMs off of a 64GB card that came with this, but they do have packages with a lot more ROMs than this. The final thing that we're going to look at is the settings menu. In here, we have a couple of options that we've already looked at before, namely Bluetooth settings and those network features. We can also go in here and customize the icon look, but I'm going to keep that on stock for now. And we can also come in here and change the background. The cool thing that we can do is use that Start RetroArch option, and that's going to allow us to use the full RetroArch system to our liking. For my purposes, I kind of wish we could just boot directly into this because this is all I need. And from the testing that I've done over the last 2 days, I don't really see a lot of stuff that's wrong here. There are some configuration options that could be a bit better and some wonky behavior when you have this connected to a Bluetooth controller, but all in all, it works really well and you can customize anything that you want. Let's take a look at the SD card contents of the card that came with my unit. The first thing that we can see is we have a large BIOS folder filled with way more files than you could ever need for this hardware. We also have easy access to our RA saves and save states right from the root directory, which is nice to see. If we head into the ROMs directory, we can see this comes with a ton of ROMs. My handheld came from China, so these ROMs are all in Chinese. Each of these systems also has a box art directory, and they seem to have box art for all of the games that they include, which will save us some time. I already went ahead and made a new SNES folder inside this one, and I added 4 ROMs to it. This process is pretty simple, so I'll just demonstrate how to do it with N64 ROMs. My 64GB card did not come with any N64 games, so I'll just paste over a few that I want to use for this testing. It's that simple. In this section, we'll go through the process of installing Garlic OS 2.0. After visiting the main website, we need to head over to the GitHub repo for this handheld. The first thing that we need to do is grab the bootloader, extract the files in the zip, and paste them to the root directory of the SD card. After that, we need to grab a second SD card and format it as exFAT. I'm going to use a random 32GB card for this, and I'll format it inside Windows. Once that's done, I'll create a new folder on the card and label it as boot. Go inside that new folder, and then we're ready for the rest of this install. Head back over to that GitHub page again and right-click Save As on the link for number 3. In the Save As dialog box, change the file name to remove the extension and change the Save As file type to all files. Finally, we need to head over to the link listed for number 4 and download the ARM HF rootfs file from the assets section. I'm going to copy that file over to my boot folder and I'm going to extract it there with 7-zip. After that's finished, you need to boot up the device one time so it will make the rest of the folders that we need. Then we just need to follow that same process again to add ROMs to this second SD card. I'm going to add some Super Nintendo games and some GBA titles to test this system out. And with that installation process done, we can reboot the device into Garlic OS 2.0. I'm going to do a brief overview of this, but to be honest, there's not a whole lot to talk about. At the top, we have our time and a battery meter, and on the bottom, we have menu and then some control labels. If I press the menu button, you can see that we can only change the date and time and the language. If we go over to the library menu, you can see that I have only 2 systems visible right now. I have Game Boy Advance and Super Nintendo. These are the games that I manually added in the last section, and if I go into those games, you can see that we have a list view, and I like the way this looks with the titles centered in the middle, and we can just go through them easily, and it'll just wrap around when we get to the bottom. If we press A on any of these, we will launch into the game, and you can see how long that process takes in real time. If we press the menu button again, we just back out to the games list without having access to those options that we have in the stock OS. If I now go over to the resume section, you'll see that it has added a save state for that game that I was just playing, and if I press A on that, I will launch into the game and you can see how long that process takes. The last thing that we have is RetroArch, and if we go in there, it will just load up RA just like it would on the stock OS, but the big difference here is we don't have GPU support. So what does that mean? Essentially, it means that we are not able to take full advantage of this upgrade that we have here. In fact, with the system in the way that it is right now, you won't be playing N64, Dreamcast, or anything else that needs to use a GPU. I have to assume that this won't be like this all the time because the developer should have access to the GPU drivers for this, but at least right now, this essentially turns the RG35XX Plus into a Miu Mini. But again, the system here does work. It just doesn't seem as fleshed out as the Garlic OS system for the original unit. I have that on this device, and it made a bigger impact versus the stock OS for that unit, but the stock OS for this system seems to be much better than it was on that device. So the gap doesn't really seem in favor of using Garlic OS 2.0 on this device at this point. It probably goes without saying, but I just want to say, no hate on the developer that made this system. The Garlic OS system made a huge difference with the original RG35XX. It made that device usable while other developers got on board to port different things to it like Bato Sarah and some of the other operating systems that you can use. But this thing was really hyped up as having day one release, and it does have day one release. I got this on day one and it worked on day one, but it's just all of the new things that this device can do are not supported on Garlic OS 2.0. So in a sense, it doesn't matter. You can't play PSP, Dreamcast, N64. There's no Wi-Fi functionality or Bluetooth. The only benefit that I found is that you can hot plug HDMI a lot easier and it's faster. But you're just really limited in what you can do. So I don't see the appeal of this, at least at this point. The stock OS this time around is a lot better than the third-party option that we have. I don't expect that it's going to be like this forever, and it's fully possible that in a couple of weeks this thing has full support for all of the things you can do in the stock OS, but that's not the situation now. When that does happen, I'll take another look at Garlic OS, but at least right now, the stock OS is a much better experience on this, and I cannot believe I'm saying that with an Anbernic device. Let's jump into some performance testing. I plan to do a follow-up video delving into this device more, and I'll have more detailed tests in that one. This video is already getting super long for a first impressions look, so I'll only include a few titles in this one from the systems that show the most improvement. The first one that I wanted to take a look at is Nintendo 64. Control issues aside, the performance isn't bad, but there is room for improvement with other emulators. Dreamcast is another system that saw a decent performance bump. Based on what I'm seeing here, I would say this is closer to an RG3566 at this point.
Go that that way, baby.
You're full of energy.
Baby. Yeah. Oh. Hey. Yeah. Oh, couldn't be more careful. Hey.
Nintendo DS also seems to run a bit better than it did on the original. We can use the enhanced resolution option in most games now to improve visuals, but we don't have a lot of controls to work with. Finally, PlayStation Portable is another system that got a big improvement with this revision. We won't be able to play the entire library on this processor, but we can play a decent selection. This is going to be one that you'll want to tackle with an external controller because some of this is difficult to do with just a D-pad. So let's wrap up things on this first impressions video of the RG35XX Plus. I still have a lot that I want to do, including comparisons with other handhelds that this competes with, like the RG35XX, the Miu Mini Plus, and the R36S. On the software side, the experience is actually pretty decent with the current state of things. There is room for improvement to make the system better, but this is like way better than the original device was, and it's kind of shocking to see. The performance is also pretty decent, and again, there's room for improvement here, but just based on what I'm seeing from a day one release, it's pretty good. I also think the price is actually pretty competitive for what you're getting here. If you think about it, Anbernic sold the RG351 series with a processor that was worse than this, and they still sell those devices for more money than this guy is going for, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but this is a good bargain, at least from Anbernic's side of things. I only had one issue with this device, and it was an issue that I had that I posted about with the first unit that I bought. For those of you guys that don't know, I don't get free units from this company. I have to buy all of them myself. If you look at my channel, you'll see that I don't have reviews for a lot of the devices from this company, but I do own them all and I do buy them all at release. Typically when I buy them, I'll buy at least two, and I use different shipping addresses so they don't know it's going directly to me, so I don't have any chance of getting a cherry-picked unit. It might sound strange to say that, but that is a problem in this market. So at least when it comes to this company, there's no chance that they'll know it's ever from me. That's a bit different this time around. I bought this white unit with my real address and name, so they could have seen that it was going to me, so that one could have been cherry-picked, but the second one that I have here went to a different person, and there's no way they could have known that this one was going to me. Unfortunately, the one that came directly to me is the only one that has a screen issue right now where there are lines going all across my screen. I noticed it immediately while I was filming the unboxing portion of this video, and if you listen to the audio track from that time, you'll see that this was a surprise to me. What the is this? So after I found out that issue, I contacted the company directly. I don't really have any official ways to contact them anymore, but I just did like a Hail Mary and said, hey, my screen is broken, and I showed the pictures just to see what they would do. Even though I buy these things privately as a consumer, I still try to give them the heads up for issues like this when I think that they're pretty significant. They responded by saying they would send out a replacement for this white one. That hasn't gotten to me yet, but I do have my second unit that I bought, and this one doesn't have any of those issues. And I don't anticipate that the one that they're going to send to me now will have those issues either. So it's just unlucky that the first device that I bought had those issues, and if it was the only one that I bought, this would be an entirely different review. The benefit of my approach is that I can really talk about how this would be if you bought a product from this company. There's no doubt in my mind that if I went through customer support, I could have got a replacement for this, but it would have taken some time to send this unit to them and then wait for a replacement to get to me. If the company sends a replacement to me directly, then it cuts out a lot of that work. I think the last most important topic that I could go over is like, is this worth the upgrade if you have an RG35XX already? And that's an important thing to go over because like, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but the RG35XX is a really popular device. In China, like the official listing numbers show that this sold almost 10,000 units, which is crazy for handheld in China. But yeah, as a person that has 3 of the original device that I bought with my own money, I could say that this is probably worth the upgrade. The Wi-Fi functionality and the Bluetooth support is definitely a killer feature to have because it opens up a lot more doors without having to rely on USB dongles. From a performance standpoint, this one is a clear winner, but I'll have more in-depth looks at that in the next few videos. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see another, take a look at a video that I did on the original RG35XX. Happy gaming, everyone. Taki out.